Adam's mother on The Young and the Restless? Well, her name was Hope Adams Newman Wilson. And for me, Hope is where Y&R began. I started watching The Young and the Restless in the summer of 1993, and I've watched every single episode since. Hope was my first female lead. Before I knew the history of Victor and Nikki, before I knew the history of Victor and Ashley, or any of the women that Victor Newman had loved before, I knew Hope. Hope was a blind woman living on a farm in Kansas, and Victor fell into true love with her in the summer of '93, far away from Newman Enterprises, far away from Genoa City, and far away from everything I would eventually learn made Victor, Victor. That quiet little romance pulled me into Y&R, and more than 30 years later, it still has me. Hope was gentle without being weak. She was independent, moral, stubborn, and very capable. And Signy Coleman played her with so much warmth that Hope never felt like a blind woman to me. She just felt like a real woman, a real romantic lead. But Hope's story did not stay on that quiet farm in Kansas. She followed Victor to Genoa City and became his wife and the mother of one of the most complicated characters Y&R has ever created, Victor Newman Jr., or as we know him today, Adam Newman. The Victor Newman, Hope Adams, Kansas farmhouse storyline began in 1993. Victor Newman is carjacked. His body is found inside of a burned out car, and Genoa City receives the news Victor Newman is dead. But Victor Newman is not dead. He is alive. And he ends up in Kansas on a farm with Hope Adams. No Newman Ranch. No corporate office. No one calling him Mr. Newman. Just open land and a farmhouse, and this blind woman who was willing to see him, able to see him, not for who he was, but for who he wanted to be. Hope had inherited a genetic disorder called retinitis pigmentosa, and there was no cure, no surgery, no soap magic. She just lives independently on her farm and runs her life with a quiet confidence. And in fact, I think that's one of the things that I really loved about her. Hope's blindness was always present. It shaped the way she moved through the world, but it did not define her entire personality. She had humor. She had pride. She had opinions and a whole life before Victor Newman ever walked into it. Hope was engaged to her longtime friend, Cliff Wilson. Cliff was a good guy, but Cliff was boring. Cliff was safe. He was familiar. He was an established part of her world. But then came Victor Newman. Victor was a mystery, a force of nature, and he was very different from any other man that she'd ever met in her small town. And I have to say, Eric Braeden and Signy Coleman had such a soft, unexpected chemistry between them that was just irresistible to me. I understood that he was larger than life. You could see it. He was a fish out of water. And yet, he slowed down when he was in Kansas and he was with her. He listened to her and to the world around him for maybe the first time in a very long time. I got the sense that when Victor was with Hope, he was not having anything to prove. There was nothing for him to conquer. He was simply living, and they were falling in love. But loving Victor in Kansas was one thing. Following him back to the life he had left behind in Genoa City was something else entirely. Because Victor never forgot, never lost track of what was still happening back in Genoa City. He knew that his rival, Jack Abbott, had taken over Newman Enterprises. He knew that the company he built from the ground up was being divided and divvied up. And while everyone in Genoa City was learning to live without Victor Newman, Victor was in Kansas planning exactly how he would come back from the dead for revenge. Victor returned to Genoa City, very much alive. And while everyone was still recovering from the shock, Victor went to work, taking back his company, taking back his life, settling the scores that had carried him all the way from Genoa City to Kansas and back. But eventually, the man Hope had fallen in love with on that farm, the quieter Victor, the one who slowed down, the one who listened, started to fade away. He no longer belonged solely to her, contained within this little bubble. Victor now had a history. He had a family, and that family included Nikki. Hope could feel the connection between them because Victor and Nikki were never completely over, and Hope had no interest in becoming the third point of that triangle. So she actually left Genoa City. She went back to Kansas. But Victor followed her. He proposed to her. And in 1994, Victor and Hope returned to Genoa City and got married. Nikki got drunk and crashed the reception, but it didn't change a thing. Victor chose Hope, and Hope had become the new Mrs. Victor Newman. Victor did try to make Genoa City feel like home for her, but Hope and Victor saw life very differently. Hope valued honesty. Victor was always keeping secrets. Hope valued independence. Victor wanted to protect her, and with Victor, protection can start to look like and feel like control very, very quickly. But then there was Genoa City itself. It was loud and busy and unfamiliar and full of people who had agendas. This was not Kansas anymore. Hope had left the place where she felt the strongest and entered into a world that kept asking her to become someone else. And maybe she could have just left. Maybe it all could have ended there. But then Hope became pregnant. And suddenly, there was a whole lot more at stake than just the marriage. It was also the future of their child. When Hope became pregnant, the doctors raised the possibility that their child could inherit the same condition that caused her blindness. And they were both afraid. Victor was especially afraid. He wanted Hope to consider ending the pregnancy, but Hope refused. For Hope, her blindness didn't mean she had less of a value. She knew exactly what it was like to live a life without sight. But she also knew exactly what it was like to have a full life anyway. She had a home, she had relationships, she had love. So Victor's fear struck Hope in a very personal place. Hope heard a judgment about her life, and I think this is where the tenderness of their Kansas farm summer romance really, really, truly collided with Victor's need to control the outcome. They became estranged. Hope went back to Kansas, and while in Kansas, Hope had an accident. She fell. She was taken to the hospital. Victor flew there to be with her. And shortly after, in 1995, she gave birth to their son, Victor Adam Newman Jr. Victor Jr. The child was born with his sight, but the marriage did not survive. Hope had already decided to stay in Kansas and raise their son away from the Newman world. Victor was furious, but Hope wasn't going to bend. Victor returned to Genoa City alone, and soon after, they were divorced. That choice shaped the whole rest of Adam's life. Hope was trying to give her child a different kind of inheritance, a quiet home, a moral foundation, a life where being Victor Newman's son did not define him. And for many years, Victor Jr. did not even know that Victor Newman was his biological father. But secrets like that do not stay secrets forever. And Victor Jr. did not stay Victor Jr. for long. Hope married Cliff. She became Hope Wilson. Cliff adopted her son, and Victor Adam Newman Jr. became Victor Adam Wilson. He grew up believing that Cliff was his father. Hope built a life where her son was now free from the Newman name, and I think she believed that she had protected him because she knew Victor and she had seen what Victor's world could do to people. But in 1996, Cliff died and Victor came back into Hope's life. He brought her and Victor Jr. back to Genoa City. He renovated the penthouse so that Hope could move through it independently. And for a while, they actually tried to be a family again. But the story was more of the same. Hope didn't fit into Victor's Genoa City life, and Victor became more and more consumed by Newman Enterprises. It's an interesting little tidbit that during that time, Hope also developed an unexpected friendship with Jack Abbott, the man Victor fought for control of Newman Enterprises. But Hope didn't see Jack through Victor's perspective. Hope judged Jack for herself. And the fact that she could find friendship with the man who Victor hated most in this world just made it more clear that Hope would never live by Victor's rules. She was never going to conform. But it ended up pulling her straight into the middle of the rivalry between them. And before long, she realized that she didn't want this battle. She didn't want to be a part of this. So by 1997, she made the choice to take her son and leave Genoa City once again. Years passed. Victor Jr. grew up, and Hope kept the truth about his father until she no longer could keep it from him. Because in 2008, Hope learned that she was dying. How did Hope die on The Young and the Restless? Well, Hope Adams died from pancreatic cancer in February of 2008. Signy Coleman returned to play the character one final time, and Victor went back to Kansas to be with her. By then, Victor Jr. was a grown man going by the name Vic, and he believed that Cliff Wilson had been his father. He had no idea that the truth was standing right in front of him. But as Hope lay dying, she finally told her son who his biological father was. Victor Newman, a billionaire, a legend, your father. Hope died with Victor and their son beside her, and her death really changed the whole direction of the Newman family forever, because Vic did not stay Vic for long. He decided to take his place in the Newman family, and that meant changing his name. Victor Adam Wilson became Adam Newman. And Adam Newman came to Genoa City with two very different legacies inside of him. Hope's love and Victor's abandonment. One taught him who he could be. The other gave him something to prove. And Adam has been fighting those two sides of himself ever since. Adam grew to become one of Y&R's most intelligent, most damaged, most dangerous, and divisive characters. He wanted Victor's approval. He hated Victor for leaving him. He wanted a place in the Newman family, but he also wanted to destroy the Newman family because they made him feel like he didn't belong there. That conflict began long before Adam ever reached Genoa City, because Hope raised him with love and discipline and a moral center. Yet Victor gave him a bloodline and a wound. And every version of Adam has carried both of those things. Y&R has brought Hope back through dreams, visions, and memories, because when Adam is losing himself, Hope represents the part of him that still knows better. She is his conscience, his childhood, his connection to the person that he was before he became Adam Newman. And that is why Hope's place in Y&R history is so powerful. Hope was not important because she gave birth to Adam Newman. Adam Newman is more meaningful because he was Hope Adams's son. Hope Adams was the woman who brought me to The Young and the Restless. I met Y&R through that Kansas farm, not through the boardrooms of Genoa City, not through the ranch, through that Kansas farm, and through Victor falling in love with this blind woman who lived completely outside of his usual world. Signy Coleman portrayed Hope in such a gentle and strong and beautiful way, and it was always such a great performance. But Hope was never built to become Victor's permanent partner. I know that now. I accept that now. Genoa City eventually pulled Victor back toward power, toward business, toward Nikki, and to all of the Newman family drama. But for a little while, Victor Newman lived another life, and Hope Adams was the center of it. I will always appreciate Bill Bell, Signy Coleman, Eric Braeden, and Y&R for giving Victor and Hope this very real love story, and for creating a legacy that now continues in Adam to this day. Because when I think of Hope Adams, I don't think of a supporting character from Adam's history, I think of my first Y&R leading lady, the character who made me start watching the show in 1993 and turned me into a longtime fan. That story eventually led me to create Y&R Chat. And years later, Victor and Hope's farm romance helped to inspire the first book in my own series, The Fauna and the Flora. And nearly 20 years after Y&R Chat began, I'm still here talking about the show that Victor and Hope's romance first made me love. Oh, but now I want to hear from you, Y&R fans. Do you remember Victor and Hope's Kansas love story? And when you look at Adam Newman today, do you still see the influence of his mother Hope? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.